everyone. My name's Katie Henry. It's my second time being at the Blockley Conference, and I'm excited to be up here with Lucy today.
Great. So if I just move on to our first...
I'll actually probably come on this side. Sorry, thanks so
it.
much. So we, as Lucy mentioned, commissioned a study at the University of Dundee called How Do Blind and Low Vision People Access Coding Environments? But what is really important in a study when you take on user research like this is actually to position it within the larger community of the work that's already being done. And today we actually stand on the backs of giants who are in this room with us, like Dr. Brianna Blazer and Dr. Maya Israel and Elisa, who have been leading this conversation in the US and worldwide for many years. And so the conversation we want to invite the room to join today is around this question of what we are learning, wondering, and making with blind and low vision people. And here in just a few slides, we're going to share two examples, one around students and one around teachers, of how we are thinking about this.
And one thing just to point out at the foundation, so I'm head of product, think about product all the time, and it's worth pointing out that when we think about product, we don't just think about the technical features, the tools. In the case of MakeCode, it's not even our tool, it's one we're in partnership with. We think about it much more holistically. So we think about when we launch something, we want to launch that with teaching and learning materials. We want to have marketing materials because sometimes it's communicating that this even exists that's really important, that it includes the user guidance, the support materials. So when we're talking about what we can do for blind and low vision, it's across all of these areas of what we think will actually have an impact.
Can you click for me the next slide? So some of you may know that my background is actually in the classroom. I was a fourth grade teacher. I taught several other grades and classes, but predominantly I identify as a fourth grade teacher. It's my favorite grade. I would love to be with fourth graders all day, any day. And I actually want to share with you from a book I've been reading. Has anyone heard of this new book called Song for a Whale? It's the story of a 12-year-old deaf girl who uses her computer science skills to build a physical computing device to communicate with a whale that can't sing on the same frequency as the other whales. It is a beautiful story. And as we think about students in the classroom, I just actually want to read for you a little section of this. This is a moment when Iris receives back a poem that she wrote for her teacher. She says, "The red ink was the first thing I noticed when Miss Khan handed back my paper. In the margin were the words, 'This does not rhyme,' which wasn't true. The poem came from a sign language storytelling game that I used to do with Grandpa. One of us would start the story, and we'd take turns adding to it, one at a time. The trick was our hands had to keep the same shape for the whole story. Like, if we started out with a closed fist, every sign for the rest of the story had to be made with a fist too. We'd go on and on like that until one of us couldn't think of something to add without breaking the hand shape rule. My favorite story started with a tree full of leaves. A leaf blew away with a gust of wind and then landed in a river, floated down a stream and onto the bank. It ended with a bird swooping in to grab the leaf to add it to her nest in another tree. We told that story with our hand open like the number 5 the whole way through. It didn't look the same on paper. Paper is flat, so I couldn't use all the space above and below and around it. I needed to tell the story right. And the words in English don't have the same shapes as they do in sign language, but here's how it looked when I wrote it down. Leaves waving, blowing, twirling, flowing current, land on a riverbank. Mother bird grabs the leaf and builds a new nest. Sure, it didn't rhyme that way in English words do, but I thought maybe it would be okay to turn it in if I explained all that. I'd written a note to my teacher, but I don't think she read it. A red line crossed through the poem, ruining it. I took out my own red pen, and I wrote, "This rhymes to me." And so as we think about blindness and low vision and all spectrum of abilities, learning styles are on a spectrum too. And so as you'll see here, we're thinking about not just making resources more tactile, more hands-on. You might think because a student is not receiving information visually, for sure it must be auditory. But this is not how all students will be defaulted to learn. So we'll go to the next one. Something else to keep in mind as we look at these next two slides too is what Lucy just alluded to. It can be very exhausting and very fatiguing to be in these environments that aren't thoughtfully designed for the needs of all students. And so we actually can be frustrating our students, certainly without meaning to.
And these, what you're seeing here with the grey background, are just a couple of, we peppered in a few of the quotes that have come out of the work that University of Dundee have been doing. You can see a couple of the areas here that have been challenging. So on the back of this, and it's a big report, and we only, to be completely clear, that you've got the report back from the University of Dundee last Wednesday, so it's all very new for us. But what this is prompting is us to wonder, how might we do more to support different learning styles, different modalities of learning, and how do we do that whilst making that first coding experience more accessible for blind and low vision students? And a little bit later, we're going to encourage you guys to ask these questions to yourselves as well. So some of the things that we have done, and there are lots of things, at the foundation, we already, our education team, in terms of making lessons, often create unplugged lessons. They find that lessons that actually don't use the screen can be really valuable. And one of the things that we found really valuable, particularly for blind and low vision users, is having blocks cut out. So physical blocks, and I know the great Systematea Scratch Junior blocks are being on display out there as well. These are ones we have that you can literally print out for free, cut them out, and we've also stuck Braille labels on so that that makes them more accessible to blind and low vision users. And it's just that if you're trying to build a mental model of something you can't see very well or can't see at all, having something in the real world can be a great starting point. And then a couple of other things we launched this year or in the last 12 months have been a tactile graphic. So this is, blind, low vision students, they can feel the microbit, but they don't know what anything is. And this has Braille labels on this kind of bubble paper, so you can print this out. And a lot of schools have these printers if they have blind and low vision students. And we've also created a text-based tour of the microbit that kind of walks through this and plays out beautifully on a screen reader, so you can kind of understand a bit more about what you're holding with the microbit. And there's just a few examples.
And so thinking, as I mentioned, from the educator perspective, educators are motivated to support. It's not as if we're trying to move mountains here with attitudes. It's really about access to helping teachers have that practical experience of assistive technology. So like Lucy mentioned, as we make these tools more accessible, we have to be thinking holistically about how we're supporting that moment-by-moment engagement between students and teachers and students and other students, their peers in the classroom. And so we have a quote here. When I first started working with computer science, it was a learning curve for me. I was just brand new. I was just kind of learning it as well as trying to figure out how to make it more accessible to our students. So what we're wondering in this case, when you start focusing on the educator, is what is it that we need to include as part of the launch or alongside the new features, new accessibility features that we're offering that will provide that professional development, the professional learning the teachers need, and the support they need hands-on in the class or in a practical setting that allows them to pick up and run with these wonderful features that have been added and allows them to make better use of them and adapt them for the students they actually see. And as we talked about some of this in the last talk, but including this new Working with Students with Physical Disabilities guide that we're launching, and we're working on that one, as well as two more, one that's working with students with visual impairments and another one working with students who are deaf or hard of hearing. And there are lots of cross-links. We recognise that there are lots of kids who have a mixture of challenges, and we would love to come on to building more of these as well around more cognitive disabilities and autism and dyslexia and ADHD and all those kinds of things, adding more additional support in future. But this is where we are right now, as well as things that we can provide for the teacher. We showed you some of the stuff coming out with the keyboard nav, but we also have started doing webinars. We did one last month. That was an introduction to using assistive technology, and I was actually really blown away by how well attended that was, how many people came, and we really would like to turn that, we hope, in the future into more of a series of webinars that people can just join and learn how to use these things, because we find a lot of people like that live aspect, and they'll kind of log on for that. Okay, so this is the part where it becomes interactive for all of you and the people you're sitting with. We'd like to ask you now, we've got actually good 5 minutes for you to talk with the people around you and answer the question, really discuss the question. What are you learning, wondering, or making that might help students like these or other students that you may already have in mind. And just to quickly look at the profile of Child 1, this student it has low vision, age 12, in a mainstream school. Working on a screen gives them a headache and is really tiring. Low self-esteem, as they always feel behind. Passionate and determined, but struggling. The teacher in the care really wants to help, but has never had a student with the same needs and know very little about what's available. So we'll go ahead and let you please just turn maybe to someone you've spoken to earlier and just think about this question. We'll come around with microphones and we'll wrap up before lunch with a whole group discussion. So we'll be looking for a couple people to share out and discuss this question. You're welcome to focus on Child 1, or as a group, you can also look at Child 2. There's just 2 options up there. Okay?
Great. So please do talk amongst yourselves for a couple of minutes.
All right. Thank you so much for participating in that discussion with your peers as part of the community. Hopefully this is a discussion that you'll want to continue at lunch. Okay, I think we've got a couple people ready to jump in.
Yeah, hi. Kiki. I was wondering, so for Child 1 in particular, but I think this would also help Child 2, you had talked about having kind of tactile lesson helpers, right? Things with like cut out blocks and things with Braille. What if this Child 1 was able to do the majority of their kind of creative thinking and testing and planning through that method? Is there a way to kind of take those materials and then find an easy way to get it from there onto the screen so they have to do less work with the screen?
Yeah. Great questions. I think we've got a couple more people over here. Jennifer, did Jennifer have the mic?
You can be next. I just wanted to say the idea about using low tech to start with is a great equalizer, I think. If you've ever tried to use a screen reader, even people who are very advanced, if it's not made specifically for that, it is a very, very high cognitive task. So I think that building in from the beginning something that is tactile, something that is away from the technology. Sorry, it's probably a bad thing to say in this audience, but I think that is a first step to make people feel like they are capable. What blocks have done, bringing them down to like the kindergarten level on tablets. I work in Iowa for visually impaired students across the state of Iowa. 800 students, they're mainstreamed into their public schools. So I spend my life in this arena. And look, you're all here. I've been in a desert for so long, and here you all are. But so you have these students who all of a sudden their classmates are using a tablet, and they're sliding blocks around, and they can't do it. And so they're left out. And so when they're 5 or they're 6 years old, they feel like they can't do it. And what you guys are doing is you're making them feel like they can do it, and that by the time they get to high school, where it's line-based coding, they're in the game, and they haven't been thrown out. And so thank you to all of you. It's really exciting. These entry points, I think, are essential. Thanks for all you're doing.
Okay, one last one. Jennifer, thank you so much. Please do follow up with Jennifer in lunch break. She is a great person to talk to and work with.
So I saw this child, the things that sort of stuck out at me is that, one, the working at screens, probably not the right approach here. He or she doesn't feel successful. But also the low self-esteem. That is the part where you want to help give this child a skill that others would admire. I look at this scenario based on an example that I saw from my neighbor's grandson, who is blind, who does stop frame animation. And he does this, it's his hobby. He is 13 years old, and he does stop frame animation for people because he got a great reaction. He does something that other kids cannot do because they haven't invested the time in learning a skill. So working with a skill and teaching a skill like this, stop frame animation, that basically is a camera and blocks, or camera and clay, that it teaches a skill that, of course, can then lead on to things like coding. But it is finding the areas that helping this person, this child, become a hero, helping them give a skill that others do not have yet. And I think that's really a key. getting that self-esteem and working in a medium that they are excited about, and that they can show to people in a way that maybe even they can't even experience. And that's what I found to be so interesting.
Thank you so much. I think we are going to wrap up here so we don't even cut 1 minute into your lunch break. So thank you.
So I was just going to say that this was a very quick exercise. Please do think about it more at lunch. But one of the really interesting things when you work and do research with accessibility communities is you're constantly being told how diverse it is, how every single child is completely different and they all have different problems. And that's incredibly overwhelming because you think, well, I can't possibly, where do I start? I can't possibly design. I'm going to miss someone out. And I think one of the things we found really helpful in other areas as well, but particularly in accessibility, is starting to build out some personas. And yes, you can't, if anyone's worked with personas or segmentation, you know they're flawed, right? But they give you something, and you can evolve those segments if you find they're wrong. But starting to build out things like this, you can see quite rapidly how it helps you to get your head into the specifics of the challenge and the differences of challenges. And as I say, it's not a perfect tool, but I would encourage you to do something similar if you're feeling overwhelmed by it. So that's what we were going to cover today in this talk. It is almost lunchtime, so I'm going to hand back to Joe in just a second. But if you do have more questions about the work we're doing, either this or the keyboard stuff, please do come and chat to us. Or if you're interested after today, please do email the address on the screen. So I'll now thank you very much.